Alright, let's play a quick game. If I asked you to name the streaming services completely dominating the global market right now, you'd probably say Netflix, Disney Plus, maybe Prime Video. But what if I told you there's an app out there that casually racked up over 17 million subscribers, expanded across the globe, and is absolute printing money, and it's not run by a Silicon Valley tech bro? Enter Vivamax. Now, if you're from the Philippines, or if you've spent any time on a certain side of the internet, you're probably smirking right now, because you already know exactly what Vivamax is. And for those who don't, well, let's just address the elephant in the room right out of the gate. We don't need to hire a private investigator to figure out why Vivamax is insanely popular. The platform is famous, or, depending on who you ask, infamous, for its, shall we say, edgy, mature, and highly risque content. Let's be real, sex sells. It always has, and it always will. But here's the thing. Dismissing Vivamax as just a soft-core streaming app completely misses the point. Because what started as a desperate pandemic survival tactic has transformed into a legitimate entertainment empire. We're talking 80 original movies a year, international expansions, and even real-world fashion shows. So today, we're putting the obvious reasons aside for a second. How did a platform that started in the middle of lockdown turn late-night cable vibes into a multi-million-dollar business masterclass? Let's unpack it. To really understand how Vivamax became this absolute juggernaut, we have to rewind to a time we all collectively try to forget, early 2020. Now, the brains behind Vivamax belong to a company called Viva Communications. If you're not familiar, Viva is basically entertainment royalty in the Philippines. They've been making blockbuster movies, music, and TV shows for decades. They actually were planning to launch a streaming service eventually, but they were taking their time. So how the hell did a company pull off launching a full-blown streaming service and flood it with originals in record time? Simple. Viva wasn't starting from scratch. They had the entire machine already built and idling. Viva Communications had been a heavyweight in Philippine entertainment since 1981, over 40 years of making blockbuster movies, hit music, TV shows, and managing some of the biggest stars in the country. They owned massive film libraries, professional studios, editing suites, and a deep bench of directors, writers, crew, and on-camera talent who already knew how to crank out quality work on tight schedules. When theaters shut down in 2020, they weren't scrambling to build relationships from zero. They had decades of distribution know-how, partnerships with cinemas, advertisers, and media outlets, plus a built-in, hungry local audience that already loved their style of high-drama, accessible entertainment. Overseas Filipino workers around the world were craving content from home. Viva just flipped the switch. Most importantly, they had serious production muscle. While other studios froze, Viva poured money into new shoots, leveraging their existing infrastructure and recurring casts who could jump from one project to the next. No need to audition hundreds of new people or train crews. The talent pipeline was already there. This let them greenlight and finish movies at a pace that would make Hollywood executives cry. It wasn't just luck or desperation. It was 40 years of infrastructure, relationships, and industry muscle finally getting pointed in one direction at the perfect moment. Everyone else was panicking. Viva was ready. And then, the pandemic hit. Suddenly, theaters completely shut down. Production ground to a halt. Viva was sitting on a massive backlog of about 17 fully completed, expensive movies with absolutely nowhere to show them. No cinemas meant zero ticket sales. The entire entertainment industry was staring into a financial abyss. So, Viva's executives looked at each other and said, "All right, scratch the 5-year plan. We're building this app now." In January 2021, they officially launched the platform under its original name, Vivamax. At first, it looked like your standard survival mode streaming service. They packed the library with their old classic movies, some Tagalog-dubbed Hollywood films, and South Korean blockbusters. But Viva knew that nostalgia alone wasn't going to keep people paying a monthly subscription. They needed fresh, exclusive content. And they needed it fast. So, they took a massive gamble. While the rest of the world was hesitant to shoot anything, Viva pumped billions of pesos into production. Their very first original release was a comedy called, I Kid You Not, When I grow up, I want to be a porn star. Yeah, they didn't exactly ease into it. The movie was a massive hit, and it drew a very clear line in the sand. Vivamax realized that while Netflix was busy catering to everyone from toddlers to grandmas, there was a massive, underserved adult audience looking for something a bit more unapologetic. Horny men. The app exploded. Within its first year, it pulled in 2 million subscribers. By late 2024, that number skyrocketed to 12 million. To celebrate hitting that massive milestone, they decided it was time for a sleek, modern glow-up. They dropped the Vivamax, leaned entirely into their identity, and officially rebranded to the powerhouse we know today, Vivamax. But how do you keep millions of people hooked on an app month after month? Well, that comes down to a production schedule that is frankly, clinically insane. Okay, so you've got your audience's attention. Great. But how do you keep millions of people paying for a subscription month after month? In Hollywood, the strategy is usually spend $200 million on one massive superhero movie, delay it 3 times, and pray it makes $1 billion. Vivamax looked at that strategy and said, nah, we're good. Instead, they developed a formula that relies on 3 things: volume, vibe, and absolute velocity. Let's start with volume and velocity. Brace yourselves for the stat, because it sounds made up. Vivamax drops an average of 80 original movies a year. To put that into perspective, that is almost 2 brand new, feature-length movies every single week. Netflix, with all its billions of dollars and global studios, doesn't even come close to that kind of consistent output for a single region. How do they do it? Well, they've mastered the art of guerrilla filmmaking. They shoot these movies in record time, sometimes in just a week or 2. Using tight budgets, small crews, and recurring casts. Which brings us to the vibe. While the platform is obviously famous for its adult themes, they don't just slap a camera down and call it a day. They actually package these movies into genres. You've got Vivamax erotic thrillers, Vivamax workplace comedies, Vivamax gothic dramas. It's high-octane melodrama, just with the volume turned way up. They also created their own ecosystem of homegrown superstars. Actresses like Angeli Kang, Asia Costa, and Christine Burmas became household names practically overnight. For the fans, it became like watching a cinematic universe, just a very, very mature one. Of course, when you drop 2 provocative movies a week filled with steamy scenes and bold storylines, you're not going to fly under the radar for long. Vivamax has stirred up more drama off-screen than most of its plots have on-screen. Philippine politicians and conservative groups have gone after the platform hard. In 2024, Senator Jinggoy Estrada and others publicly slammed Vivamax for what they called graphic, exploitative, and immoral content. They accused the app of being too easy for minors to access, held Senate hearings, and demanded stricter government oversight on streaming platforms. Some even suggested pulling the app or forcing heavy censorship. The critics argue that the heavy focus on sex normalizes objectification, hurts traditional Filipino values, and might be exploiting young actresses in a highly competitive industry. There have been real public complaints from parents and religious organizations claiming the platform is contributing to moral decay. But here's the twist that makes Vivamax's story so fascinating. The outrage has been rocket fuel for their growth. Every time a politician stands up in front of cameras and starts listing specific movie titles or describing filthy scenes, they're basically handing the app a free nationwide commercial. Curious viewers immediately think, wait, that sounds wild, let me check it out. Downloads spike, searches explode, and suddenly even more people are subscribing. Vivamax themselves rarely apologize. Instead, they lean into their brand with confidence. They point out that the app is strictly 18+, requires payment, and includes parental controls. They frame it as adults making entertainment for other consenting adults, no different from late-night cable or premium international platforms that also push boundaries. The result? The controversies haven't slowed them down. If anything, they've turned Vivamax into a cultural flashpoint. In a deeply conservative country, being the rebellious, unapologetic option has actually strengthened their connection with a huge audience that feels talked down to by mainstream media. It's a masterclass in turning noise into revenue. While other companies would issue corporate apologies and tone things down, Vivamax doubled down, and the numbers kept climbing. Now, you might be wondering, in a country as conservative as the Philippines, how does Vivamax get away with releasing all the steamy, boundary-pushing content without getting shut down every other week? The secret is they're playing in a regulatory gray area and playing it smart. Traditional movies that hit theaters have to go through the MTRCB, the government's strict film review board. That board can cut scenes, slap on heavy ratings, or even ban films outright for being too immoral. But online streaming? It's a different story. When Vivamax launched, the old censorship rules written decades before the internet didn't fully apply. No mandatory pre-approval like in cinemas. Instead, Vivamax keeps things just inside the lines. They produce R16 and R18 versions of movies, build in strong age gates, subscription paywalls, and parental PIN codes. They've even cooperated with the MTRCB on voluntary guidelines. The platform argues it's strictly for consenting adults watching in private, not broadcast TV that kids can stumble across. That strategic positioning lets them crank out bold, unapologetic stories with lengthy, stylish sex scenes that would never survive a theater release. Politicians can complain all they want in Senate hearings, and they do, but as long as the content stays behind the paywall and age checks, Vivamax keeps moving at full speed. It's a clever dance. Push the envelope hard enough to excite the audience, but not so hard that regulators can easily kill the whole operation. In a place where traditional media is heavily policed, Vivamax turned the internet's lighter touch into one of their biggest competitive advantages. So we've talked about the insane volume and the very adult vibe. But let's be honest, the question everyone eventually asks is, are the movies actually any good? Look, Vivamax isn't trying to win Oscars. These aren't prestige dramas with million-dollar VFX. Most films are shot fast on tight budgets, so the quality is uneven. You'll see some movies with clunky dialogue, wooden acting in spots, or production values that scream, "We finished this in 10 days." But here's where it gets interesting. When it comes to the sex scenes, the thing everyone actually shows up for, Vivamax often delivers surprisingly well. We're talking 5, sometimes more, well-choreographed scenes per movie. They're bold, they're lengthy, and they're shot with real style. Great lighting, slick camera work, and creative locations that range from luxurious penthouses to risky stairwells. Some of the better ones even have lush musical scores that elevate the whole thing. And it's not just the steamy stuff. A decent chunk of their originals actually have solid stories underneath. Workplace power struggles, messy relationships, revenge thrillers, even some social commentary. Fans regularly point out that certain films feel refreshingly grounded in real Filipino life experiences, even if they're wrapped in heavy melodrama. Of course, not everything lands. Plenty of titles lean hard on formula. Hot girl meets troubled guy, clothes come off by minute 20 repeat. The acting from their homegrown stars like Angeli Kang or Azzy Acosta ranges from magnetic to they're clearly doing their best with what they have. The genius of Vivamax's approach is they don't pretend to be something they're not. They're not competing with Netflix on cinematic perfection. They're giving their audience exactly what they want: fast, fun, unapologetically horny entertainment that feels exciting and accessible. In a world of over-polished blockbusters, sometimes good enough and a lot of it wins. And clearly, it's working. And once they conquered their home turf, they realized it was time to pack their bags and take this formula global. So, you've conquered the local market, your subscriber count is thoroughly into the double digits, and your stars are national icons. What's the next logical step? World domination, obviously. Vivamax realized very early on that their audience wasn't just trapped on a group of islands in the Pacific. There are millions of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, living all over the globe, from Dubai to London to California, who were absolutely starved for pop culture from back home. Vivamax gave them a direct, nostalgic, and highly entertaining connection to the Philippines. But then, something fascinating happened. Non-Filipinos started showing up to the party. Take Indonesia, for example. Vivamax started trending so hard over there that the platform officially started adding Bahasa Indonesia subtitles to their entire catalog. They did the exact same thing for viewers in Japan, South Korea, and the Middle East. It turns out that high production, fast-paced drama travels incredibly well, no matter what language you speak. But Vivamax's smartest business move wasn't just expanding across borders, it was expanding outside of the phone screen. They realized they weren't just an app anymore. They were a lifestyle brand. First, they launched Vivamax Plus, a premium pay-per-view tier for their biggest blockbuster events. Then came Vivamax Club, a VIP subscription layer that gives die-hard fans exclusive behind-the-scenes content and perks. And then, they went full Victoria's Secret. They launched Project X, which culminated in the massive, real-world Vivamax fashion show. We're talking stadium-sized crowds, live musical performances, and their biggest streaming stars walking a literal runway. They took an app that people used to watch privately in their bedrooms and turned it into a massive, celebrated, mainstream pop culture event. By the time they hit 2025 and 2026, Vivamax wasn't just a quirky streaming anomaly anymore. They had built an absolute ecosystem that successfully bridged the gap between digital content and real-world entertainment. So, what is the ultimate takeaway from the wild, meteoric rise of Vivamax? Well, on the surface, it's easy to just shrug and say, hey, they gave the internet what it wanted. And sure, that's a big part of it. But if you look a little closer, Vivamax is actually a masterclass in modern business strategy. While the giant, multi-billion-dollar streaming platforms were busy drowning in corporate debt, overcomplicating their algorithms, and trying to please absolutely everyone at the exact same time, Vivamax did the opposite. They picked a specific, highly lucrative niche, leaned into it with zero apologies, and treated their audience with respect instead of being pretentious about the content. They proved that you don't need a Hollywood budget to build a global empire. You just need to understand your crowd, move faster than the competition, and embrace the controversy when it comes knocking. So, the next time you see Vivamax trending on social media, or someone asks you how a regional app managed to pull in over 17 million global subscribers, well, you already knew the obvious answer. But now? Now you know the brilliant business behind it. But hey, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think is the next unexpected niche that's going to completely take over the streaming world? Drop your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, do me a massive favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story behind the internet's biggest phenomenons. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.